I'm Karen Trevitt-Cannell, head of FIT Special Collections and Archives. And FIT is one of 64 institutions of the State University of New York. I want to welcome all the viewers to another very special installment of the FIT Ford Models Incorporated Oral History Project. This project is part of a larger Ford Archives that will be preserved at and made available by the Fashion Institute of Technology. The Fashion Institute of Technology Library is located at 27th Street and 7th Avenue in New York City, New York. I'd like to preface today's conversation by acknowledging and saying thank you to Ford personnel responsible for this project. That includes Patty Sicular, who's the director of Ford's Special Collections and Archives, Damien Neva, who is the director of media, and Doreen Small, the chief counsel for Ford. They have helped immeasurably to make this project possible and to make this assemblage of information available for generations to come. Today is July 1st, 2010, and today I'm in conversation with Grace Mirabella. I'm honored for the time and the information that she's to share with us today, and for generations of fashion and beauty historians and enthusiasts alike. She's graciously allowed us to come into her home to learn a bit about her and her place in the history, business, and portrayal of fashion and beauty. Thank you so much for letting us come in today.
Listen, I'm delighted. I'm very pleased to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm an archivist, and as such, I like to look at pictures in a full context. So I want to ask you a question that's going to be like big scope to start with. Do you remember the first time you became aware of things, of concepts like art, design, fashion, and what drew you to those things?
That's quite a question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember, yes, I became aware of art first, but I didn't put all this together.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe, give me another, because I think there's one other category that I've forgotten.
Some people distinguish things like aesthetics or art or design.
Yeah, right.
Those concepts.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you add architecture in?
Absolutely.
Well,
design in the macro.
Right, yes, definitely. I became very conscious of that for some reason, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. When was that?
I don't know. I think it was probably when I was in high school.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably.
Did it have anything to do with courses you were taking, or?
No.
Yeah?
Nor did it have anything to do with the arithmetic I was taking.
Oh, great. Well, speaking of high school, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I went to high school in New Jersey, Maplewood, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very nice high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from there to college, hoping that Wellesley was going to accept me, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Skidmore, which turned out also to be wonderful, super, and I loved it. And I studied economics. Aha. And then what do I do with that? Nothing. Nothing. But I was very interested, I would say.
Well, would you say then that aesthetic awareness, we'll call it architectural passion, or the business elements that you learned in college that ultimately got you on the path?
No, you know, I don't think any of that did. Somehow, somewhere, I became very interested in being a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Of anything. I wanted to be a buyer in a big store.
Mm-hmm.
And
was it the decision making, the strategy?
You know, I'm not as obvious as that. I don't mean obvious, smart as that.
Oh, no.
I wanted to be a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that stayed with me. So it stayed with me so that I had every summer a job in a shop.
Yes.
And in college, every Christmas time, I had a job in a store.
Mm-hmm.
I just was curious and interested, and I liked it. Go figure, as they say, right? And it really.
Well, I think, also being surrounded by, all the merchandising, perhaps, or even the newness and freshness of something shiny and ready for one to consume, to make their lives a little bit better.
All of that, something like that eventually, of course, grows on you.
What were some of the stores that you worked in?
They were Altman's.
Oh, yes.
Let me see. But starting, they were a store, a nifty shop, sportswear shop, called Fellers in Short Hills. A terrific Hain and Company, which is Newark, I think owned by Bambergers and sort of all that. And I don't if there might have been one other somewhere, but I was just captivated. Isn't that fun? Isn't that odd?
No.
Well, I mean, it's
I think you were listening to something that
I was
gave you
listening
joy.
to something, right?
Yeah,
right.
And as long as it kept feeding you that same joy, you kept following it.
Yeah, I wasn't told by anybody to do this.
That's
you're going to grow up and this is what you're going to do. No.
So it was purely from
I
your
think
core.
So. I think so.
So would you say, what was the shift in the summers and between semesters that led you to work? If I understood you earlier, you said you worked at Macy's.
I worked at Macy's when I came out of college. I was lucky to get onto Macy's executive training program. So I did that for, I don't know what, a year and a half or a little less, which was a terrific experience with a terrific group.
Yeah.
Because the members were from Sydney, from Melbourne, from San Francisco. It was such a terrific crowd.
It sounds like it was drawing people from all over
that
had the same interest.
Well, their fathers owned the stores.
Then there's that. Doesn't hurt, does it?
No.
So after Macy's, you said a year and a half?
Yes, I think so.
And where did life take you after that?
Life took me to Saks Fifth Avenue.
Nice trajectory.
I wanted to be. I decided I really wanted to be nearer to fashion, to real fashion, and not just clothes.
Interesting. So at some point along this path, you found that the innate interest you had maybe in things of design, you wanted to take that interest to a niche of fashion. Is that safe to say?
So interesting because it's so deep and thought out. And I don't know, I just sort of went along.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say I just went along because that's not so. I knew what I was not going to do, certain things I just wasn't going to do. So in that sense, I was determined.
But I like what you say, which is also deep. The difference between clothes and fashion.
Right.
And I'm curious what your definition would be, or how you would describe the difference.
That's an interesting question, because later on, I remember that people would say about me, and she likes practical clothes.
Ooh.
That always killed me. I meant clothes that I liked style. That's what I liked, really. And fashion, as in fashion-y, never interested me very much. Trendy, yeah. Never interested me that much. Fortunately, there was always someone with me in my crowd who was very interested, and they all were, I guess, very interested. So, but to give you, you wanted answers about.
Well, you answered it quite well,
Right.
actually, because I have heard, I wish I could attribute the quote, but
Yeah.
I've heard someone say that fashion comes and goes, but style remains.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, very true. I don't know who said
I agree.
that.
I wish I should look it
Yeah.
up when I get back to work, and I'll let you know who
Style,
it is.
and style's really the key
Yeah.
word.
And it doesn't have to be something stodgy or just practical. It can be one's interpretation of both trends and classics. Does that...
What does? Wait.
Style. Style is what one person would...
But I think that there's got to be somewhere a word that says, hey, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not just here are a couple of combinations.
Right. It's true.
That's not good enough.
It's nebulous.
Yeah.
It really is.
Right.
But that's why we're lucky to have certain editors-in-chief to give us some guidance along the way. I'm curious about your time at Saks. Can you tell us
Yes,
a
I
little
was.
bit about that?
I was in the publicity department,
Oh.
wanting to be in the fashion department, and trying to be in the fashion department. I mean, by sort of asking around, and
Mm-hmm.
and I saw the boss, who was a marvelous woman, who was head of advertising and windows and like that, and I was in her department, and I asked her one day if I could is there a place I could be in the fashion department? And she said, I don't think so. I think we're filled. And I said, listen, if I can't be in the fashion department, I can't be here. I realized a little late what I had said.
Gutsy.
Yeah, gutsy or dumb or I don't know what.
No.
But anyway, but she wonderfully let me swing on that for a while.
Oh.
And I suffered until she turned to me and said, you know, you should really be on a fashion magazine,
Oh, man.
and I'll make a call.
I love this.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that never dawned on me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But how insightful of
Yeah,
her.
right.
And generous, really.
Generous, absolutely.
So who did she call?
She called Mildred Morton Gilbert on Vogue, who was the executive editor of Vogue, and sent me over there right away.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Mildred Gilbert, who was a very good-looking woman, and a very slender woman, and a very tough woman, and she took me on, and I became her some kind of assistant, and I was given a desk. Is this all right? I'm going on with
Please.
I was given a desk in Bettina Ballard's office,
Oh!
the fashion editor of Vogue.
How old were you at this time?
24.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And the desk that I was given was in between. Let me see. Was with the furthest part I could be from her. And what I was there for was to watch the run-throughs and spot the musts, and be able to report if the must got in or if the must didn't get in.
Oh my, that's such a responsibility. Oh.
An embarrassing one too. I thought. But I mean, that's what I'm here for.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, so I did that sort of for a while. And I think when she came in the morning, she first said good morning. I mean, she tossed it over my head to her secretary. And at a certain point, I was going to go to Italy for a few weeks. And I was leaving the office and sort of late-ish, and it turns out that she was leaving at the same time.
Oh.
So I'm thinking to myself, what do I say to her?
We've all been there.
True, oh,
Oh my
we've all
gosh.
been there. And
Oh.
I sort of said, gee, I can't wait to get out of here. I'm going to go to Rome, and I don't know if I'd ever come back.
Oh, so it was for pleasure, not for work.
Oh, no, it was pleasure.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so she asked me about the trip and a couple of things like that, and that was that. When she came in the next morning, she walked in behind me and through and said, Grace, Simonetta and Fabiani would like you to call them. They're at the Regency.
Ooh.
And they'd like you to have a drink. And I had a job
Oh my goodness.
in Rome.
Oh, that is wow.
Yeah. And she was so good. This woman to whom I'd never spoken was so good and had me come to her house and talk to her about it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
How long were you in Rome?
I was there about maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, not quite 2.
And what role did you play for the magazine?
I didn't play any role for the magazine.
Oh.
I worked for Simonetta.
Oh.
And I was sort of public relations person. That's the words they use in Italy all the time, whatever. And I was doing that and trying very hard to learn the language and so on.
Wow. Did you? I want to back up just a little bit.
Sure.
Had you been a reader of Vogue's up to that point before you started working there?
Not really.
And
You were young.
Ah,
I have
yeah.
a question. And the people, the lady that helped you at Saks and the editors, it might have been a little difficult at Vogue when you started, when you were 24. Did any of them get to see your success as editor-in-chief?
Yeah, yes.
Oh,
Some
fine.
did eventually,
And
sure.
how was
And
that
I
when you
think
saw
I
it?
might be wrong about the figures because I had to do all those different things. So maybe it was more like 26, 27.
But they got to see your success as editor-in-chief,
Well,
the people that you worked under.
I don't, I'm not so sure of that because that takes a while to happen.
Well, and I think this is a good segue to another question that I have in terms of, well, first I'd like to know, when, after the year and a half in Rome, what was it that brought you back to the States? Or I'm assuming you came back to the States after
Yes,
your
no, I did.
Okay.
I did. Oddly enough, I made my phone call to Bettina Ballard, who wasn't there, but I got a friend of mine and said I was coming back. And she said, Bettina Ballard just resigned this morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
Right. And of course, none of that, our crowd would know anything more, anything more about it. So I think I cabled her that I was doing that. Is it okay? And she said, yes, sure, it's okay. I mean, I just wanted to know that she didn't think I was coming to some terrible moment.
Yes.
And that's what was going on at that moment.
So, when you came back to the States, did you have a position at Vogue waiting for you, or did you have to go through another process?
I had to go through. Did I have something sort of waiting for me? I think I did, sort of. That I just had to establish that I was back and so on. But I was back, and Life magazine offered me a job.
Nice.
And I think I can't remember her name. I can't remember. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Kirkland, Sally Kirkland.
Oh.
Sally Kirkland offered me a job. I went in to see her and see whoever I was supposed to see, and came out. And the next morning, I had a phone call from Sally. And she said, listen, Grace, I've made a terrible mistake. I realized that you're really not for us,
God,
etc. That kind of thing.
great day.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
You know, I thought I sort of told you, I thought I was sort of suggesting it to you in all those striped sweaters and all these. I remember the striped sweaters because I had wonderful striped Italian sweaters at that point. And they were just, I think I still own them
I
someplace.
wear the French ones.
Yeah.
So
I loved them.
That's so sweet.
Anyway, so that they done me in.
Oh
so,
my gosh.
So I went back to Vogue, and they took me back.
Excellent. Now, was it on Impact that you started working for Ms. Vreeland, or how did?
Oh gosh, no. Oh no, absolutely not. I
Clear
went
things
back.
up for me.
Okay, I went back, and I was editor of. I went back, and I was editor of. It's a section in the front of the front of the book. I'm not even sure if it's still there.
There used to be Vogue's View.
Yeah, before it was earlier.
Okay.
It's earlier than that. And it has merchandise in it.
Oh my gosh.
The shopping column.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
I had that.
Oh.
And then eventually, Deanna Vreeland came to Vogue. And
that was around 1960.
it was 60,
Around 1960?
around 62 years old. She came to Vogue, and I somehow was picked to be one of her, or the last fashion editor. I mean, no, because I wasn't up to any of this. And then finally I was given a market,
Oh, excellent.
not a market I would have wanted, but anyhow. Do I go on like this?
Yes, I've got some ways to give a little bit of framework, but I appreciate I love the serendipitous quality of some of these exchanges. Yes, go ahead.
I have this market, so I go down to 7th Avenue. And so it was a difficult market. It was for older ladies, I think.
Oh, my.
It wasn't for matrons of it, but it just for me, who was a sportswear person, I just didn't get it and didn't want to get it. And I would bring my clothes in to show Mrs. Vreeland and her run through, and I would show her the clothes and show her this from the rack and this from the rack, and et cetera, et cetera. And she said at the end, Grace, I mean, something like, you did this very nicely.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
No. I mean, I caught that sound.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and she said, she really sort of said, listen, you don't understand what's going on here. That's what she was really saying.
Ouch.
You've seen the clothes, you've seen how they organize or they arrange or do whatever. And I realized I was not in that game.
Okay.
And I realized as soon as I walked out that door that I was going to keep walking.
Oh, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. Tried to get jobs outside. I mean, went around and saw people like Catalina swimsuits and a whole bunch of, not a bunch, but at least 3 or 4. And was offered 2 of them probably. And I just couldn't wait to get out of there. Really couldn't.
Wow.
And I was walking down the hall one time, and as I'm walking along, I hear Mrs. Vreeland clomping along.
Oh.
And because it was a distinctive sound. And as she clomped past me, she hit my shoulder like that and said, "You don't want to do that." I just kept moving.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because she was aware of,
Oh,
what I
that
was
is-
doing.
And was it, how long thereafter did you become, I've heard the term, her assistant?
Yeah, I don't know. I was assistant, and then I was associate eventually.
Okay.
But probably at that very beginning, she invited me for a drink. Downstairs there was this restaurant, Jansen's down, and she invited me down for a drink, and she was remarkable. There was a big struggle in the pocket, and she put her watch down on the table so that she knew how much time she was
Wow.
giving us. And what else did she put down on the table? And then she started talking to me and saying what she'd like me to do, and she'd like me to be with her
Wow.
and work directly with her, and so on and so on. And I would get in sort of simple things like, "Mrs. Vreeland, I mean, I'm not a secretary. I don't want to be your secretary."
We've heard that grace before, haven't we?
Right. And no. And then that went on, and that switched off, and I went on into something else. I mean, I don't remember. But she said, "Okay, I'd like to know what you decide by." Oh, I had her at lunchtime. "I'd like to know what you decide by 5:30.
No pressure.
And I said, I can't do that. And could I do it tomorrow morning? And so she said yes.
Oh, good.
Right.
That's something you have to sleep on, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, she saw some sort of greatness in you that she wanted you to stay around.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know quite what.
But if she saw, she was a great editor, and she saw something
Right.
unique in you.
Right. Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that in the morning I realized what I'd be losing if I had said no.
Brilliant.
And I realized, well, I don't know if I realized anything more, but I sure did learn that she was super. She was very straightforward, very honest.
That's a gift.
Very honest, trusting.
Oh.
You know, all of those things that I never knew at all about. So that was the beginning.
Working for Ms. Vreeland, do you recall like one or two occasions or projects, what have you, that stand out as turning points for you as a professional?
Working with her. I get. This is not quite what you want, but let's see if it fits. She brought a young girl in, young model, in with a very famous hairdresser who had been flown in from London, and the model was there, and the hairdresser was there, and the staff was around, and the hairdresser, and I'm there, the hairdresser starts cutting. And he's cutting, and he's cutting. And I left.
Oh.
My office was directly next to hers, and I left. So eventually it was over, and she came into my office. We were connected offices. And she said, "Where should you go?" And I said, "I just thought that was a terrible everything. Haircut. I just thought that was so unfortunate."
Oh no.
And she said, "Why didn't you tell me?"
Oh. What were you supposed to do? Hold the scissors?
I was supposed to somehow
Oh my gosh.
get some word to her.
Wow. Did you guys have almost like a code
No.
for communicating?
No.
So she just wanted you to scream, "Stop!"
No. I could slip her a note on her desk or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh my gosh. But it harkens back to what you said of our trust of your opinion.
Yes.
Wow.
And it wasn't that my opinion meant so much, I don't think, in that, but she would hear it, see it, take another look at that haircut, and just sort of think a little bit more.
Right. These weren't very geometric haircuts, were they?
It wasn't Fidel.
Oh, okay.
I wish it had been Fidel.
I thought that's where we were going.
No. I don't think this haircut was going anywhere. But
well, his haircut certainly did. So I guess it stands to contrast.
Super. Super.
So how long were you Ms. Vreeland's assistant or associate?
Associate till, I guess it ended up being 7 years, and she was fired.
Oh, yes.
And
would you like to talk about that or no?
Oh, sure. Well, not that I know anything about that. I think we were all stunned. She was stunned, of course. That is a Vogue way of doing these things.
Oh, okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. Name the editors who weren't fired just like that.
Wow.
Vreeland was fired like that. I was fired like that. The editor of Mademoiselle was fired. That was the size system.
Did he do it himself or send someone else?
He told somebody else outside. And for me, it was when, I forget who it was on the 5 o'clock news. And she announced that I had been fired from Vogue.
Oh my God.
And my husband, oddly enough, had the news on and called me.
Oh.
He said, you know what, God, I can't think of who it was, but it was a friend too. This is what she's saying.
Did you know it was coming at all?
No.
Oh,
No.
Oh.
And so Bill said, "Listen, you better get there and see Alex Lieberman, if he's around." So I went to see Alex. And Alex, what's this? And he said, "Well, I'm sorry. I'm really so sorry." And then he said something about, "I'm getting really tired." Or I don't know, he gave me some dramatic little something that he could have fought for me, but he didn't.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but anyway.
And did you ever see Mr. Newhouse after?
I went up the next morning and saw Mr. Newhouse, who added money to it, and that was it.
Wow.
And I said to Cy, you're right to do these things, but to do it the way you did. Everybody,
It just, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's certainly, it's maybe bold of me to say this, but it seems not only unprofessional, but to have it be aired on the news, it seems almost mean-spirited.
Isn't it
in a
odd?
way.
Well, anyway, they're odd.
That's- Yeah.
And then you started your magazine.
No, no, I went, well, anyway, yes, about 3 days later,
Wow.
a friend of mine called and said, Grace, Rupert Murdoch wants to call you. And I said to my friend, who was Ed Cosner, I think, at Esquire, what do I want to do that for? And he said, because you do. So I said, okay.
Oh, Lord.
So I'll be home. And he called. Anyway, I had lunch with him,
Excellent.
and etc.
I want to talk about that particular magazine in a little bit, but while we're still sort of on the edge of your working at Vogue, in a nutshell, can you think of just like some key terms that would describe any difference between the way Ms. Vreeland ran the magazine and the way you ran the magazine?
Oh yeah, sure. The kind of ordinary were ordinary words, but the timing of all of this was the women's movement.
Right, right.
And although I had not been sort of a really follower of the women's movement, and they were always trying to find me to dig on me. What am I doing? What am I doing? I was still very aware of what they had done and how important I thought some of that work had been. And what I wanted to, and I knew what I wanted to do was put a little ease into Vogue, into the photographs in many cases, and into the text.
When you say ease, you mean less sophisticated?
I mean, not that. No, ease, you can be sophisticated and have a certain ease, but it's not arch, you know.
Yes.
And
it's almost like we're going away from fashion to clothes. No?
You see, that's where everything gets mixed up. No, you're not. But you're going away from extreme.
Okay.
And anything.
Maybe more palatable and accessible?
I think more, yes,
Okay.
I think
Less
certainly.
fantasy.
Okay.
And less fantasy. I think.
Less fantasy.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
With different eras. And
Right. And I spoke to the group about it the first day of it all. And what I was hoping to do, and I described this ease and more content, less arch writing, this changing that was going on was important, and
it was
stuff
such
and stuff.
a dynamic time.
And I said, I defined all of this differences. One of the fashion editors, who was a top fashion editor, Polly Mellon,
yes.
stood up and said, Grace, would you go through that again? Because I know I'm not the one that does it. I mean, I know that I'm the one that would be the difficulty.
Okay, wow.
So to speak. And I went through it again, and then through everything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we started the first issue, Polly performed perfectly. I mean, she got it. Carlene Surf they all did. I mean, as if, where had it all been?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Did you find, the women's movement was, I think, especially for a vehicle like Vogue, an obvious influence, but also Did you see things like, I don't know, racial equality, racial tension? Did that factor in at all, or the anti-war movement?
No, not that was later.
Okay.
And no, I saw equality sort of there. Took us a long time to do a black model.
That was my next question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I have Vogue from August of 1978 in my apartment, and there is an African American model on the cover.
No.
Yeah.
No. No. Because I know exactly when that cover was.
Okay.
And it was, what did you say it was?
August of 78.
Oh, August, I thought you
Yes,
said. You know, it's either that or maybe a couple of years
before.
before.
Peggy Dillard.
Yeah.
Peggy Dillard.
No,
I
it
think
was, what's her name,
Beverly
Johnson.
But that wasn't the first black model.
No, I'm not saying it's the first.
No,
but
Beverly Johnson was the first.
Beverly.
Right.
That's.
But she's talking about a different issue with Peggy Dillard.
I know, but I thought you were talking about the first.
Oh no, ma'am. No, just it happens to be because it struck me as a teenager in the South.
Right.
I saw this black model on the cover,
Right.
and I just had to have it. Grew up in a very liberal family, and I said, I've got to have that Vogue. So, but I figured when I understood that your tenure was, 71 to 88, that especially that first block of time must have been, volatile in terms of trying to, absorb the change that was happening and how it must have been reflected in the magazine.
But it was indeed. But it was something that eased into. I mean, it's not because you looked at it and thought, I got to fight this.
Right.
You didn't feel that way. You wanted to move things. You wanted those women to understand what was going on. You want to see the difference in dressing and ways, and it was an interesting time.
How did all of those social and even political fevers show themselves in the clothes, in the fashion, or can you even recall a correlation?
I don't think I understand what you're asking.
Let's say the women's movement, greater freedom for women, maybe greater freedom in dress.
Right.
How do you recall it manifesting itself?
Well, we just organized that. I mean, in the selection of clothes, in the selection of clothes, it was, now this is my fault because I always use the word easy, but that meant that nothing was excessive about it, unless it was big time haute couture and you wanted to show every single Saint Laurent, because that was fine. I mean, nothing was wrong with that. But we started to go around looking for a kind of ease and a kind of reality.
That's a word that I think nails it.
Yeah.
In a way, as Patty was just saying, the lessened fantasy element.
Right.
At the same time, though, I also think that you had not just an ease in the line of clothes, but in terms of, hard and fast rules as well. Whether it's, the only thing that come to mind right now would be white after Memorial Day.
Getting rid of that.
Yeah. I mean,
shoes and dresses matching.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I actually don't think I ever thought of that. I mean, we just went.
Maybe the timing isn't perfect, but I grew up in the 70s, and I remember, seeing pictures even as a child with my mother, and there being such a stiffness and a rigidity and a predictability. And yet, at some point, a lot of those restrictions went away, or were not respected anymore, or something. And that must.
Well, the only thing was the white, but nothing else was a restriction. I mean, that just was a.
But you get a sense of that easing, almost across the socio
Yeah.
political, economic culture, but yet you see it in the clothes as well.
I always thought that it could be. I mean, there was Saint Laurent, superb. There was Armani, pretty good. No. Why? There was Jeffrey. Wait, there was Jeffrey and there was Bill Blass. Super. Why were Americans having more trouble getting that ease and not that what's what I'm trying to say? I mean, why did they feel they had to get uninteresting clothes, and then came the man's time, women's time, and they could wear ties and gray flannel suits. I mean,
it's almost as if they really needed a playbook.
We had to beat all that. Right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the other thing we had to, we worked on very, 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 very hard. And my husband, the doctor, played a major role in this. This was women's smoking.
Oh.
And Bill
wow.
was a lung cancer surgeon, and very much a part of that lovely doctor who was in the government. Yeah. And we worked very hard.
That's wonderful.
On that.
At a time where every other ad is Virginia Slims,
And at a certain point, I mean, they started talking to us from the business department. But the publisher was such a neat fella and so smart. And he said, listen, you tell me when you're going to do those blockbuster articles. And I'll be smart enough not to get an ad in that same issue. So the poor advertiser is furious. So that was a part of it. Bill was a part of it. Good medical pieces that he got for me was a part of it, and it just really worked. I mean, it had to take pressure on it and pressure on it, but it did.
But that chimes in again with a change in not just a silhouette, but also in what was considered healthy for a woman in terms of how she looked, what she weighed, body mass index, all of that. You had the emergence of like the Christy Brinkley's that were
but I was going far deep, more serious than that.
Sure.
And the medical pieces that we ran were serious. They weren't how to cut your nails and do your They weren't that.
I think it's a wonderful accompaniment to a time when women didn't feel like they had to be twiggy anymore, and they could pay attention to their health in a more holistic and deep way. So you're lauded for that. I didn't realize that was a part of your legacy.
Absolutely.
Staying on a deep level, if you'll indulge me. As you can see, I like to stay there. I think sometimes of fashion as ornament or decoration in a way, and some people also can call it fine art as well. But did you find in the 70s, because it does sound like the magazine took almost a cerebral, embraced a more cerebral text and storylines for women to read. Did you ever want to portray or delve into the element of how fashion and the clothes we wear are more than just something that sits on top, that it's a way to express ourselves as individuals?
I think there were articles that did that, that went on that.
because that's just an interest of
Yeah,
mine. I wanted to
right.
talk to you about.
Sure. I think that was. I'm not sure that was.
Yeah. Because I do think of the magazine as being one of, I won't say artificiality or artifice, but everything you said just recently made me think that the theory was almost sound, and that you would look at it from a more psychological place rather than just one of ornament. I was wondering if you could define the phrase practical fashion for me, or do you think it's an oxymoron?
I think. I think men who are sawing wood are in some practical, not just jeans, whatever, the overalls.
Yes.
I used to think, I just thought that was, had nothing to do with the conversation.
Do you think there is such a
Practical.
thing?
No. Well, yeah. Wait. That's wrong. A raincoat.
Yeah.
But it's got to be a good raincoat. I'm not just interested in any old raincoat because that's practical.
Well, what good is pretty if it doesn't keep you dry if it's raining? Sorry.
But it's not that's what I'm saying is it's not enough to be some sort of practical.
Right.
Sneakers, well, they're worn more and more.
Yeah. But
I'm
it used
just
to be
saying,
the tennis court, right?
Yeah.
Strictly.
Right. No, but I'm saying, I remember as the system grew of women walking to the office.
Oh, yes.
And they had their running shoes on or their whatever. And then they'd shift.
Yes.
Or maybe they wouldn't. Well, I think in our place you shifted them.
Today,
Yeah.
I thought about that whole sort of trend, if you want to call it that, recently, because now women wear flip-flops.
Yeah, right.
And it's the kind of like hearing a high-pitched noise when I see it. It's just, something's wrong because they've got on this fabulous suit and flip-flops. But it's, I guess, to take care of the same need is to be comfortable while they get to where they're going.
To where they're going?
Yeah. You made a very good point in terms of the work you did with your husband on the articles for medicine and not smoking.
Right.
Do you feel, or did you feel that there was certain information other than that you felt driven to use a vehicle like Vogue to get a message across about fashion or otherwise?
Well, I don't understand. There sure was as far as the medical stuff was concerned.
But not even, it doesn't even have to be something that serious.
Yeah.
You were in a position to reach so many women. And did you feel, or did you have, I don't want to say causes necessarily, but did you ever say, I have the means to get this information out to millions of women? And did you indulge? What sort of indulgences?
I'm trying to think of what. What that would be. Well, of course, I always think in terms of health.
Self-esteem, or
psychologically and stuff. Yeah, that was all there too. But I don't know how to come up with it as a.
I remember a lot of exercise.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
Whether it's the.
No, that was there. That was absolutely there.
So
right.
I just keep thinking of this whole push for fitness that just didn't seem to be in the women's magazines before.
Right. Right.
I was thinking also about how, even though there was this ease, you also had almost a schizophrenia in the 70s when it came to like the romanticism you might find in Jeffrey Bean or Bill Blass, and then you had this whole androgyny movement with women wearing pantsuits, or even the tuxedo looks of Yves Saint Laurent. Did you ever find it difficult to reconcile like this high romanticism with what women who wanted to dress like men?
Yeah, but they weren't dressing just like men. I mean, depending on what they were wearing.
Right.
And so there's part of the romanticism.
Well, yeah, that is right. Yeah.
I don't see the problem, but then of course I don't see that kind of clothing to begin with. I mean, I see the best of the clothing. I don't see the worst of the clothing.
I see. Oh, so that's a very good point, because the best of whatever niche,
Right.
the psychological niche a designer was trying to reach
Yeah.
or create, it was great.
Right, right.
That's a very good point. So
Yeah.
this is why I love doing this.
Yeah.
You will learn so much. Well, do you think, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask anyway. Do you think Vogue influenced culture, American culture, or do you think American culture influenced Vogue?
Well, I think probably a little bit of both. But I mean, the more one, I think it was important. The content of Vogue was important. I mean, the articles and the pictures, always the photographs, were super, and they were well chosen. Alex Lieberman, who was the, never can remember what his final title was, but anyway, Alex was really the one to take that over.
Nice.
And I mean, no, that played a role, sure.
I have two questions. How did you feel when you would see people, not models, but people not in the fashion business, walking down the street wearing outfits that were obviously influenced by your magazine, by Vogue?
Well, if they were good ones, I mean, I was delighted.
No, but even street fashion. I'm not talking about designer, but they took, obviously working class girls that took things, ideas from outfits that were put together in Vogue, and they
Right.
put them together.
But I'm saying if it was done,
Oh, if it's done.
Yeah.
well, if it was done well,
Yeah.
that was super, absolutely.
Mrs. Vreeland and yourself and Anna Wintour, you're all very powerful and very talented women in your own right. Do you think that you all would have been as successful with Vogue magazine in each other's eras, or do you think you're a product of your times also, your success? Do you think Mrs. Vreeland could have been as successful in your era or in Anna
Well,
Wintour's era?
no, that's a very interesting
It's a
question.
great question.
Yeah, I could not have done what I did, or think in the terms that I was thinking, if everything hadn't started changing. And
60s.
And I think that's a very, now where Anna Wintour fits into this, I don't know. In the sense that,
And would you have been as comfortable editing in the 50s when they were beautiful clothing, but a lot more restricted?
probably not. You see, I came out of the whole sportswear world and moment.
Talk about ease.
Yeah, and moment. I'm not talking about warm-up clothes. And,
Right, no, like
Yeah.
Bonnie Cashin.
Right, exactly.
McCardle.
All of them. And for Vreeland, well, then I think I wouldn't be able to answer, and I'll tell you why. Because excuse me, I've just got hair all over there. She was her own person, I think. Now, maybe if times were different, she would have come up with something different. I know that anybody else who knew her would say that's a dumb thing.
No.
But I think it could have been. I don't know, but
Do you ever look at certain magazines and think, oh, you could do better? Or if you look at a certain spread?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do it less and less.
Oh.
I mean, I don't look at Vogue except maybe every now and then an issue, first of the year or the middle of it, something like that. I'm really more tuned into magazines like The Economist or
Excellent, yeah.
Time or Hate to See Newsweek Go and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I have
You
another
ask
question.
really good questions, dear.
All the editors, did you ever have meetings or dinners or like jamborees with all the Vogue editors from around the world, like French Vogue and British Vogue? Did you ever get together for conventions and discuss the magazines or try?
You
to
know
have
what?
one direction
I'm
or
not
another?
sure. I think we did, but I'm not sure that it was here. I think it was in Paris more.
To give a work on the same stories or
They,
try to help each other?
That crowd, no. No.
No.
No.
I mean, it was just so extraordinary. I tried to get them together because I thought it would be an interesting
Yeah.
and smart thing to do. In some way, you get something out of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Forget it.
La la la.
And did
English Vogue, when B. Miller was there, which is quite a while ago, was easier and so on.
What are some of the funny things that people try to do to get your attention to be able to be in your magazine, either as photographer or model? Like send flowers or candy or come out on the doorstep?
Bribes? Is this what we're talking about?
But they must have, I'm sure that so many people must have done crazy things to be.
I don't remember that.
No.
Yeah, I don't
You
remember
had a
their.
great secretary then. That
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it could be. I mean, I don't remember odd things like that.
You were very taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I was looking down here because I forget, there was a question, moments of one of my favorite people was Vanessa Redgrave,
Oh. Oh.
who I just was, I did the first sitting
Oh.
with her.
Magnificent.
She was in London. They were coming out from the country to the London stage in the prime of Jean Brodie. And she invited the group. And every time she was photographed in Vogue, I would be given that sitting in New York or in California or wherever. And she was just so good and so attractive in her whole manner. And
You know who reminds me of her? I hope I pronounce it correctly. Tilda Swinton?
Swinton.
oh, really? I
Swinson?
don't
There's
know.
something about her.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing Redgrave in a film that had to do with Nazi war camp.
Julia.
Was it Julia? The musician? Was she a musician, I think? But her head, the point is that her head was completely shaven. She was quite thin, and her bones were just so beautiful. I mean, the structure
yeah.
of her face was divine.
Yeah.
Just divine. It's so
That's
funny
with
you
Jane
mentioned
Fonda.
her.
Lovely.
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
70s.
Yeah.
What?
It was from a book by Lillian Hellman, and it was the movie was made in the 1970s with
Okay.
Jane Fonda.
Okay, no, we're thinking of
Oh.
something different. One thing I want to ask you about.
What?
In the special collections at FIT, we have over 500,000 works of art on paper, mostly fashion illustrations.
Oh, really?
And I've always been curious as to when photography usurped illustration. Because there's a definite, I haven't come to a date, and there may not be like a fixed date, but when you were at the helm of Vogue, do you have a recollection of even using fashion illustration?
Yes, sort of. Certainly when Vreeland was there, and they were marvelous, superb artists, and they were not necessarily artists doing fashion, but they, whatever the moment or whatever they were asked for, they were so good. They were so good.
I know an illustration professor at school that brought this tension of illustration versus photography to my attention, and he put it so well. He said that it's coming back, illustration, because women can see themselves more easily in an illustration when it's not of a particular person, whereas in a photograph you have a distinct individual. and women may have a harder time imagining themselves either in the clothes or the setting, but the illustration is more transcendent of person. But I was very curious to get your opinion on the decline of illustration, and whether you thought it had its own purpose in relaying fashion motifs.
I don't relaying
like fashion motifs, and I don't know if it would capture the essence of a work of fashion better than a photograph at times.
I mean, it could. When we started Mirabella, there was a wonderful, we thought marvelous artist in Paris. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember his name. And he was always in the mag. We had him no matter what.
Okay.
But he wasn't. His assignment wasn't to do a bunch of girls in Saint Laurent or something. You know, it wasn't. It was his thinking about something, or we were talking about something. I can't remember anymore, but it was that. And I wish I remember his name. I could look it up.
Speaking of fashion photographers, one of the questions we do like to ask people is, do you recall, super close working relationships with certain photographers that you would like to discuss?
Oh, sure.
Goody.
Yeah. Sure. Let me see. I mean, a favorite of mine was Penn. But a favorite of ours, I should say. But I really was not a good enough sittings editor to give him what he should have. I mean, truly. I mean, Arthur L. Gordon. Oh. You bet I could do that. And Bill King, who I love. I'm crazy about Bill King. Just crazy about Bill King. There's a photograph of Bill King, and the photograph is the model wearing a white crepe Jeffrey Bean pantsuit pajama. And the dog was some fierce dog.
Talk about contrast.
and I think in the picture he'd opened his mouth and well, the sitting is referred to as the pajama the dog ate.
You could see the future of that.
Was that the Doberman? Was that the Doberman picture?
Was it a Doberman? I think maybe it was.
I know that picture. I can see it.
Yeah, right. And
was it Lisa Taylor or Renee Russo? Was the model, I think.
Yeah, it was one of the. Boy, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it because was I in New York when it happened? I think I was, and Jade called from Paris to tell me that this had happened. What was I supposed to do? Jade, would you call Jeffrey, or would you call, I forget who his partner was at the time, and Jade would call, I forget who, I mean, we divided this up.
Like a SWAT team.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Yikes.
Exactly.
What models do you recall enjoying working with?
I'm so bad on remembering them by name.
Or campaigns in particular.
No, I mean Patty Hansen, of course.
I can only interject if you don't mind, only because I was doing all of, I can add only because I was doing all the Vogue covers, scanning all the Vogue covers from your era, so I can tell you that Patty Hansen, Rosie Vella, Renee Russo, Kim Alexis.
Ah, right, Kim Alexis.
Joan Severance.
What? Kelly Emberg, yes.
Joan Severance. Those were all the girls constantly.
No, they were, and then there
Shields.
Brooke, right. and there are still and Beverly Johnson, and still a couple of
And I'm
others.
trying to think who else.
Yeah, me
But
too.
those were girls that were really on the cover. I
Mhm.
like them. Renee Simonson, but that was more in the 80s.
Yeah.
I have a stepson who is a surgeon, and was at that point. Tell me if I'm taking too much of your time. I have to tell you this.
We're thrilled.
Yeah.
Tell me, he was is a surgeon at I don't know quite where, Mount Kisco Hospital, and also one in New York. But anyway, at that point, he was with Beth Israel. And he walks in the door to see me and says, "I've got an idea." Antonia, what's your idea? If you all would do a fashion show to help Mount Sinai, or whichever it was at that point. Was it, did I say Mount Sinai? No.
Beth Israel.
Beth Israel. Beth Israel to gain some money. Would you do it?
Oh.
Anthony, this is a new magazine, and et cetera, but we'll try. So, of course, with Jade, naturally, you can do it. With your crowd of girls, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
they maybe not all of them that you mentioned, but whoever we got, they were just super.
But that's a
Oh.
tribute to you because
Yeah.
I adore you.
Well, thank you.
That's what I was thinking. It's
And-
a tribute.
We did this thing, I think, twice.
Wow.
And if you did it today, these girls would come back and do it again for you.
Really?
I bet we could.
I bet
we
so.
would.
God.
I bet
And-
Why
so.
not? I bet.
They were
Oh, wow.
just something. They were
Oh.
just, I'll never forget them.
So it sounds like you worked a lot with Ford.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
All the top agencies.
Yeah.
right.
But I would never get to speak to someone like Grace on the front because she didn't do the bookings. She was
Right.
That's right,
there was
yeah.
the
Well,
bookings out of
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Right.
Did you know Eileen and Jerry?
Yes,
Mm.
yes,
Mm.
yeah. We'd have dinner with them. Bill and I would have dinner with them at different times, and oh yeah,
I've
sure.
heard about parties, either
Yeah.
on Long Island. What was the place called? Game with the Q. I believe.
Quote?
Quote. Yeah. That or in New Jersey. Right.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
They-
places.
where are
And
they
Street
living now?
78. She lives in New Jersey,
Yeah.
in Califon, and she also comes into the city every week to the University Club.
Oh, in Califon. I remember Califon.
So you
yeah.
socialized with them a lot. Were you and Eileen on the phone a lot for work reasons at all?
Reasonably, yes. Yes,
always
and
behaved.
especially when I had to, yeah.
I handled those girls.
Oh my gosh.
And then she'd come out for her office, or whoever,
Mhm.
So misbehaved.
Oh,
I can't remember. Was it on tape that we discussed the transition to Mirabella?
Not too much.
Okay. Because I'd like to maybe jump into that.
sure.
I was a subscriber, by the way.
Good.
And there were two articles that even today I remember. One was an excerpt of a book, a finance sort of advice book, and it changed my life situation at the time. I have to tell you, because the article sent me to the book.
Oh, yes?
And then there was another article, a little lighter, but it was a comparison between American and European sensibilities of beauty. And oh my God, I can't even remember who was on the cover, but I kept in fact, I still may have I just tore out the sheets that I
Right.
wanted to hold on to.
Right.
But the one for one, in terms of things like, the epitome of a Chanel ensemble compared to more sportswear, even though
Right.
American sportswear probably fed off of the genes of Chanel's work. But still, it was just, I loved, and I said, I want to be European. It never has worked out. But I thought it was a fabulous magazine. Just a wonderful
Oh, good.
magazine.
Thank you.
When you started the magazine, and had all that decision-making power and wherewithal, what did you want to be similar and different as compared and contrasted to Vogue?
Well, we wanted, let's see, the easy thing. We wanted to keep that ease I'm always talking about, and really never arch, really never, and we had just half the book was fashion. It was not most pages fashion, some feature. It was half and half. And the writing was quite different. Not quite, but was different. It was a bit easier than the Vogue was. What else?
It almost sounds like you took the satisfaction from the times you delved into more serious topics with Vogue and made it more of a feature or fixed part of this next endeavor.
Made what?
The actual serious articles,
right.
Like the health ones. I'm sort of assuming here, but I can see the brain working saying, ooh,
right.
If I had a magazine,
yeah.
It would be more heavily geared towards these articles.
You know, and there would be a section of a book, a new book that was just coming out. The pages were never, if you're reading page 40, you have to get the rest of it on page 85 or 110 or something. It had to stop. Even the staff was tough about that. Anyway, I think it was very good looking.
Absolutely.
And no thanks to. That whole world of models just done us in.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Huh?
How so?
Are you serious?
The magazine, you mean, or?
I said the models done us
Yeah.
in.
How did they do you in?
They did us in by saying they couldn't work for us.
Oh no!
Yeah.
At Mirabella?
Right.
Oh,
I never
no.
said that.
Oh wow, the models did.
It was the bookers, it wasn't the models.
Oh my gosh.
Unless they were afraid of getting Vogue angry, I don't know.
Well, I think they were. I mean, I think in essence it
ridiculous.
gets down to that.
Wow.
And
It's
we
a
tried a
different
lot
world
of
these
different
days.
ways, huh?
It's a different world these days. A much different world.
Hmm.
That really gets me very upset because he was so kind and
Right.
people always have the nicest things to say.
It happens. I'm trying to think of the ways we went around it. Would be personalities, but we didn't do that much. It's more Italian. And we had more Italian photographers too.
At that point, though, if you had trouble, why didn't you get on the phone with someone like Eileen?
I think we did.
Oh.
I think we did.
But I think you're onto something because there weren't so many magazines at the time. And if you're competing, the competition is just that much more fierce, you know. And now, especially with, you know, the internet and all the whole
It's
realm of
changed.
digitization,
Oh
it's
wow,
just
wow,
like
wow.
You can print out something so professional,
Right.
just on impulse. So, did you find when you were constructing what would be this new magazine, did you have like a mission that was remarkably different from when you were editor-in-chief at Vogue?
Well, we did in all those words that I used, but we maintained the photography was very maintained in a non-fantasy kind of stuff. Gee, I don't know, but I mean, everything about it was different.
Was it more a part of you?
Huh?
Was it more a part of you?
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so.
And I have a question. When you worked at Vogue magazine, were you given more direction? I mean, I always thought as editor-in-chief you got to call all the shots. But did you have to answer to anybody there?
Oh, yeah, sure. You always had to we had to answer to Alex. Because a final cover, he'd be the man with that. I mean, there was always somebody.
And how about at Mirabella? Did you have to
At
answer?
Mirabella, I mean, I don't remember. There might have been sometimes one of the Murdoch crowd, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I have two questions. As editor-in-chief, do
Yeah.
you think of yourself as the face of the magazine, that you're editor-in-chief and you represent that magazine when you're out? Are you the public face when you were with Vogue or Mirabella? Do people think of you as the public faces
Yes.
for Vogue?
Yes. Yes.
Did you find that too weighty for comfort? Or?
No, because it varied so.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from something to nothing to. I mean, I remember when in The Devil Wore Prada, I remember the scene where by this time her assistant is off and going to go get married and whatever, and Streep has to go to this meeting, and she goes into this meeting and starts to walk into this very crowd, and I looked at that and I thought, I know what that's like.
Oh my gosh.
Because with my crowd, they ran the course for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have that group, that's a toughie. You have to get through. I don't know. It just stayed with me. That.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm.
I'm going to back up a bit. Did you feel ready in 1971 to take on editor-as-chief? Or does anything ever get somebody ready for that?
I don't know. You know, I guess I sort of felt ready. I knew that I had my support of Alex Lieberman, and that we'd talk about how I wanted to change things, how he created that change, and the art. There was an art director who really didn't play much of a role. It was really Alex who did, and a lot. I mean, he was really perfect. He was really just super.
Had you been thinking about, if I ran the show, here's some things I'd like to
You know,
do.
oddly, no.
Yeah.
Oddly,
Okay.
no.
Did you think when you were younger that you'd wind up in that position?
Never.
And then
Never thought of a magazine.
And then you became editor-in-chief, and then the next day everybody, I'm sure, was at your feet.
Yeah. Oh, so to speak, right.
Clothing, flowers, champagne.
Oh yes.
Oh,
Oh yes.
invitations.
Oh yes.
May I ask what designers have you personally liked to wear their work?
I wore. Let me see. I can't tell you I can't get the timing straight. But I wore Blas. I wore Emmanuel Ungaro. And I'm talking about a lot. I mean, it's not just Jeffrey Bean, of course, as time went on,
Sure.
and Armani.
Nice. Oh.
And how did you dress for work every day? Did you wear slacks, nice slacks, or did you dress in a full suit?
No, no. Well, how was it? What Alex would say would be, she's going out to lunch today.
I think
And that would be,
I have saved an article
from a late 70s Vogue where one of the buyers at Barney's was featured. It was in The View, I think, or In View. And it was great because she would wear Armani suits with a Hanes t-shirt underneath.
Yes.
There'd always be this balancing
Right.
that she would bring to her ensembles, but there was one point, a little photograph where she was in this beautiful, it looked like probably a Jeffrey Bean sheath-ish dress, and she said, "My lady's always dressed for lunch." So when you said that, I was thinking, oh, okay, I know what he's talking about.
Good.
Well, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, and then, I could talk all day if you could.
Do you want to take a rest at all? Are you okay?
Pardon me?
Do you want to take a break? Or?
No, I think we should finish.
I've got two more questions.
Right.
How would you define beauty?
Now, are you speaking of as in a beautiful face, a beautiful picture?
Feel free to choose the framework. No pun intended.
Overused word, by the way.
Of course.
I think beauty is, I can't define it except to say that it's overused and so much when it's used has nothing to do with the glory of somebody. Because that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think that's a perfect definition.
Right, right.
Do you think your role with Vogue and with Mirabella has helped shape what we think of as beautiful?
I don't know. Really don't know. I think at Vogue, it might have. And I don't. I'd like to say yes, but I don't really know.
We want
Huh?
No. Just listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any last thoughts before we shut off the? Any last thoughts before we shut off?
No, I'm
the
just looking at this. Could I wait a minute? Here.
Oh, I do have a question. Was the Mirabella your signature?
No, the Mirabella. No, the Mirabella was. Who did it? I can't remember who did. It was not my signature.
Okay.
And then an artist whose name I'm not going to remember, who we sort of knew, who drifted in our office the way people do, and we showed it to him, and he made some tiny change, and it was just I wish I can't remember. Jade is always Jade. Jade will remember. Right.
What's the biggest surprise of your career before we shut off the camera? What's
Biggest
the biggest
surprise.
Or do you have one?
Being fired was,
Yeah, that.
and I guess being editor.
To Ryan Lund.
Yeah, right.
We're luckier.
Right.
We're luckier for it. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, how kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.